Every Commander player has heard that lie right before sitting down against a deck that makes them miserable for 2 hours. Let's face it, building a control deck in bracket 3, so it's actually viable without turning yourself into the ultimate table villain, is an absolute nightmare. We all want to let our decks do their signature gimmick, but what if your gimmick is stopping everyone else from doing theirs? For years I thought it was an impossible paradox. I built control decks, watched them make the table miserable, and dismantled them. Yet, against all odds, one specific build has survived. Through endless restrictions, brutal testing, and a blueprint that shouldn't work on paper, this deck didn't just survive, it thrived. The secret? We took a weak mechanic and a creature designed to be a 99 support card, and put her at the helm of a surgical, counter-based control deck. I present to you Lulu Stern Guardian. Welcome to Dogwater Brewing. Face value, she's a 3 mana 2/3 that lets you proliferate at instant speed. Sounds decent? Right. Well, Wizards of the Coast was so terrified of her potential that they absolutely gutted their text box. Her first ability reads, whenever an opponent attacks you, choose target creature attacking you and put a stun counter on it. If you've never played this card, let me translate how bad that actually is. First, Lulu only cares about you. Nope, not like that, pervert. If they take her planeswalkers, Lulu doesn't care. Second, it says choose target, meaning it's top dead by Hexproof, Shroud and Ward. And worst of all, it puts a stun counter on the creature, but it doesn't tap it. If the creature has Vigilance, it gets a counter and goes on with its life like nothing happened. Does she sound like a terrible commander to lead a control deck? Good, because she is. So, how did we arrive at stun counters? Before I discovered the joy of Commander, I was a standard control player. In that format, there is no mercy, no space for pet cards, and winning is the only metric that matters. When I transitioned to EDH, I brought that same exact cutthroat mentality with me. I brought the Archetype Recon, stuffed it full of board wipes, counter spells and spot removal, stripped out every single creature except a Hullbreaker Horror, and added a few polymorph effects, alongside a single win condition approach of the second sun. I built a localized Azorius Prison, and during the few games I actually played it, my opponents were absolutely miserable. Even when I won, it felt hollow. I'll never forget the player staring at me after I resolved my 4th consecutive board wipe and asking, "So, how are you actually planning to win the game?" To which I casually responded with, "Oh, I'm just waiting to draw approach." I didn't even realize, I could have just killed them in 3 hits with Shurikai. I was just autopiloting a gridlocked board state. That tech didn't last long. I dismantled it, built a few other things, and then I saw Lolo. I realized that stun counters might be the perfect evolutionary step for a control deck. Stun counters deal with a threat temporarily without removing it from the board. It's an accountant's approach to removal, not as oppressive as a kill spell, but it gets the job done, most of the time. Players don't get nearly as salty about a frozen creature as they do about a wiped board. Just imagine playing against that old Shurikai deck where every spell you cast gets bounced by an Hullbreaker Horror, with the board wipe coming here and there, versus playing against Mono Blue Lulu where the opponent has to actively pay 4 mana every turn just to keep your best creature tapped down. It feels reasonable, fair even, until you realize how deep the synergy goes. Our game plan is as follows: delay our opponents just enough to assemble a win condition. We want to establish an engine as soon as possible, keeping the biggest threat in check using our spells, mana or words. But let's be transparent. Stun counters are not an efficient way of removal. We have almost no way to handle permanents that provide massive value just by existing. If an opponent resolves a Marionette Master, it can completely ruin our day. This deck is also incredibly mana hungry. To grow your board, you need to proliferate. To do so, in the worst case you have to invest 4 mana into your commander, and cause no direct impact on the board. Meanwhile, your opponents are building efficient boards and threatening your life total. However, you have a massive secret weapon: instant speed proliferation. As a blue player, it is your solemn duty to make the whole table slow down. The moment you can afford ending your turn with open mana, you are threatening interaction. Once that happens, people will start looking at you before casting anything. If a key piece seems to threaten the game state, you can always give it the red card and shut it down. And if the coast is clear, you upgrade your engines. To keep this hungry machine running, we rely on 3 distinct categories of mana generation: the stable storage, ever-flowing chalice and astral cornucopia. These are our baseline batteries. They work immediately, scale effortlessly into the late game, and provide clean mana we can use for absolutely anything. Long-term investments. As foretold, and the Aether Spark. As foretold does nothing initially, but once it ticks up to 2 or 3 counters, it lets you threaten a free counter spell on every single opponent's turn. The Aether Spark is our jack of all trades. It starts slow, but the raw synergy is undeniable, creating a massive blocker alongside, but its value is huge, and a sudden burst of 10 mana has closed out many games. The Proliferation Cost Reducers. Cryptic Trilobite, Painted Prism, and Lost Cheat. This is where it gets dangerous. If we can generate 4 total mana of these pieces, with just one being blue, we achieve an infinite proliferation loop. Hitting 2 to 3 mana is usually enough to threaten a game-ending turn from turn 8. Take Cryptic Trilobite for example. Most of our card draw engines require counters to function. If we have Danny Pink and Lulu on the field, we can proliferate using Trilobites on mana. The moment the counter lands back on it, Danny Pink ability triggers, drawing us a card. Scale that to our entire board, and suddenly we are drawing 3 cards for 2 mana while building an army of massive creatures. Speaking of Lost Cheat, I know what you're thinking. Why are we running a combat damage based equipment in a hard control deck? Well, mostly because Umezawa's Cheat is one of my favorite cards of all time, and it's completely unplayable here. But Lost Cheat is a beast. Having the option to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature to kickstart proliferation, or untap a land net extra mana is a massive utility tool. In fact, it's the secondary win condition. Removing a few blockers at instant speed does turn a game around. To boost the synergy of untapping lands, we run Saprozan Scary and Nyctus Shrine to Nyx, and there are 2 more cards that reduce the proliferation cost that do not require setup, and I feel I should mention them here, which are Training Grounds and Nekothal Inquiry Dominance, I guess, both effectively discounting Lulu's activation cost down to half. And again, those mana generation cards are dangerous, they dictate when we can close out the game. Next part, card draw power, because no control deck runs on water. We need to dig for answers and assemble our engine pieces simultaneously. Our core research team consists of Danny Pink, Polywog Prodigy, Insight Engine, and a fresh new piece from Secrets of Strixhaven, Pensive Professor. The Professor is incredible because he can set himself up alone. Polywog Prodigy takes a second to evolve, but it becomes an absolute engine later on, and Insight Engine scales out of control within a few turn cycles. Quick aside, yeah, I am running Ristic Study. Look, I could make an entire video about why this card is a psychological hazard, and I probably will someday, but since I am piloting a fundamentally weak, low-tier commander, I don't feel that bad until I find a more synergistic card to take its place. This deck interacts primarily by tapping and stunning things, and in a 4-player game you shouldn't be tapping creatures preemptively. Figure out the target by making use of a special type of spell, Politics, before using resources. Strike a deal, point out a mutually dangerous player, negotiate a truce, just do something. If you don't engage with the table verbally, you will be wasting resources. When words fail, we deploy the Eva Machinery, Hilda's Crown of Winter, Opposition, and Braided Net. If you have them, use them. We then weaponize those stepped creatures with payoffs like Veritas Circle, Scroll of Isildur, and Summon Shiva. Scroll of Isildur is a perfect summary of everything this deck wants to accomplish. Step 1, it steals an opponent's Soul Ring, accelerating us while setting them back. Step 2, it stuns 2 creatures, buying us time to proliferate. And Step 3, it draws us a handful of cards. It is an absurd amount of value packed into a single 3-mana saga. Oh, and yeah, lore counters can be proliferated too. Speaking of tapping, we need to talk about our stun mechanic. Lulu herself doesn't reliably tap down the entire board, she works more like a pillow fort. To go on the offensive and freeze our opponents out of the game, we need heavy field equipment. Lost in the Maze, Fear of Sleep Paralysis, and our big stun engine, the Watcher in the Water. Lost in the Maze acts as a double-duty spell, flexible protection and removal. Fear of Sleep Paralysis completely removes our dependence on manual proliferation by keeping cards stunned passively. But the Watcher in the Water is our true weapon of mass stabilization. As long as we can draw on our opponent's turns, this Kraken spawns an army of tentacles that double down as immediate blockers and repeatable stun pieces. When you pair the Kraken with Veritas Circle and Opposition, you unlock a terrifying 3-card soft lock. During an opponent's turn, you can tap a tentacle using Opposition to tap a creature. This triggers Veritas Circle to draw a card, which triggers the Watcher to spawn a tentacle. Opposition doesn't care about summoning Sickness, so you can use this to tap all the creatures in the board. We can even use nesting grounds to spread the Kraken's stun counters to opposing non-land permanents, or move indestructible counters from Tekuthal to create an immortal frontline. So, how does Lulu actually close out the game? Our primary protocol is direct, poison counters. We are not a traditional infect deck, we are running 5 moderate to highly efficient cards to introduce the first counter. Prologue to Phyresis, our gold standard, Inkmoth Nexus, which neatly hides in our mana base, Blighted Agent, Plague Mirror and Viral Drake. We only need a single poison counter to each opponent once, from there we sit back, hold up interaction and let our proliferation loops do the killing. To ensure we can reliably proliferate if Lulu gets removed, we run efficient proliferate spells like Tezzeret Gambit, Contentious Plan and Expansion Algorithm. We back them up with continuous high synergy agents like Thrumming Bird, Dreamtide Blade and Flux Channeler. Our secondary win condition, as you already know, is the Surgical Strike, stacking Lost Shit to make a massively buffed Lulu completely unblockable, or any other chunky boy. Finally, we glue the entire strategy together with blue powerhouses that fit into our heavy mana requirements. Mana Drain, Mana Sculpt and Cryptic Command alongside with blue staple interaction. Now would be a great time to address the tutors we are running. We are trying to make a highly niche strategy work without a lot of native support, so we are relying on a few quite specific tutors. We run Tularia West, Metal Mixture, Trinket Mage and Scour for Scrap. Tularia West serves as a land in a pinch. Its main transmute targets are Inkmoth Nexus if we need to apply poison, Everflowing Chalice and Cryptic Trilobite if we are starved for mana. Metal Mixture is a highly useful counterspell on its own, but it can also transmute to fetch our primary poison vector. Prologue to Phyresis. If we already have the poison down, we can grab Lost Amaze, Cyclonic Rift, Polywog Prodigy, Pented Prism or Expansion Algorithm depending on what you need. Prologue to Phyresis is almost always the priority here. Trinket Mage strictly fetches our heavy utility tools like Lost Shit and Everflowing Chalice, and Scours for Scrap does a similar job with the added flexibility of grabbing Pented Prism or the Aether Spark. The tutors are quite limited here, however, full disclosure, if I had a spell seeker laying around, I would absolutely swap out Trinket Mage to test it out for a few games. Moving on to the practical, let me set the scene from a recent testing cycle. The player piloting the Wise Mothman casts Prologue to Phyresis, accidentally poisoning the entire table for me. Fast forward a few turns, the Mothman player has a massive commander, a Winding Constructor, and a stunned agent Frank Horrigan. The other two players are sitting at 6 poison counters, completely on life support. I have Malcolm, Alluring Scoundrel, the other Spark sitting on 11 charge counters, and a 6-7 Lulu equipped with Lost Shit. If the Mothman swings at me, I'm dead to commander damage, the second Malcolm gets removed. It's my upkeep, I start running the data, I realize I have exactly enough mana to proliferate 4 times. If I activate the other Spark's ultimate, that lets me poison out the 2 other players, knocking them out completely of the game. But how do I survive the Mothman? I use the charge counters from the Lost Shit to make both the Mothman and his Winding Constructor unable to block. Lulu swings in for 10 unblockable damage, setting up a lethal on my next turn. Assuming I can survive his immediate response, I pass the turn with 0 mana open, looking completely defenseless. The Mothman player smells blood, he swings out with full confidence and casts Beast Within, targeting my Malcolm to clear the air. But the trap was already set. In response, I remove the final counter from the Lost Shit to untap a single blue source, allowing me to cast an offer you can't refuse. The removal is countered, the Mothman gets frozen out by a fresh stun counter from Lulu, and the lab takes the game. Death by Lulu, calculus completo. At the end of the day, I'm very happy with how far this deck has come. Before the recent support from Strixhaven, I was seriously considering either powering the deck down into Bracket 2 or giving up and turning it to a generic artifact combo deck like most proliferate builds end up becoming. This experiment taught me a lot, and honestly the research is far from over. To my dislike, there are still very few stun cards that can truly pull their weight in Commander, especially when you are trying to control 3 other players at once. Stun counters are a mechanic that keeps getting support, so you may see a few good inclusions in the next sets. Because of that, it's very rare to feel complete dominance with this deck. Instead, you constantly feel like you are just trying to buy a little more time. If you can delay the threat by just 1 more turn, you might just pull off the win. It keeps the games incredibly close, which also increases the fun and satisfaction for the entire table. Playing Lulu also forced a shift in the game dynamic that I originally hadn't planned. The game is becoming intensely interactive and highly political. The game style suffers from some direct counter strategies such as Blink, Vigilance or non-creature based strategies. If you need to deal with those, your allies are your best choice. But perhaps the biggest lesson I learned, and one that took me a while to accept, is a fundamental rule of the lab. Sometimes, to make bad cards or weak archetypes viable, you have to support them with premium, expensive staples. I never expected to be running Nykthos, Mana Drain, or the infamous Rhystic Zedi on a Lulu deck, but here we are. Well, at least for now, until some niche, more synergistic cards get printed. If you wanna try this experiment with your local playgroup, grab a box of dice, cause the full deck list is linked in the description below. Now I wanna hear from you. What is the absolute worst mechanic or archetype that you have ever tried to force to work in Commander? Let me know in the comments below. I've started a side project, an EDH podcast. Check out EchoStorm EDH if you're curious, link below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the stunning mechanics of Lulu, stunning, right? Got it? Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out the next breakthrough. Stay weird and keep brewing.